Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a special treat tonight. Rear Admiral Kiss Robertson Hale will speak to us this evening about authentic officership. Just to tell you a little bit about her, Rear Admiral Robertson is the Deputy Assistant Administrator of USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Services Office of Public Health Science and serves as the agency's Chief Public Health Veterinarian. In these roles, she oversees the science behind FSIS's regulatory agenda and represents the agency in One Health engagements. During her 15-year history with FSIS, she has worked in multiple offices within the agency, including the Office of Field Operations. In 2008, she joined the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention as an Epidemic Intelligence Service Officer. And in 2010, she was assigned to the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene as a CDC Preventive Medicine Fellow. Her educational background includes a BS from Georgia Institute of Technology, a DVM from Tuskegee University, Golden Tigers, an MPH from the University of Minnesota. As a flag officer in the Commission Corps, she also is an Assistant Surgeon General. Rear Admiral Hale has received numerous awards and recognitions. In 2018, she received the James H. Steele One Health Outstanding PHS Veterinary Career Award. And in 2019, she was named an honorary diplomat of the American Veterinary Epidemiology Society for outstanding contributions to One Health. That was a mouthful. Wow, Rear Admiral Robertson, welcome. Over to you.
So it's wonderful to be here. When Commander Wilson Egby invited me to speak, I was incredibly honored. And she and I go back years. She knows me pretty well. And she thinks for some strange reason that I have a philosophy on officership that's worth sharing with others. So that's really why I'm here, is just to share my view on life as an officer and navigating it. If by chance my presentation misses the mark, you can go after her, throw the tomatoes at her, okay? All right, so let's get started. I like to begin my presentations by defining terms because it's a great way to level set. So let's do that with officership, okay? Merriam-Webster's has this to say about officership: the post or rank of an officer. And the lexicon says it's the position, rank, or profession of an officer, the function or conduct of an officer. So both of these definitions are pretty plain. They're not really teeming with a whole lot of meaning. And that tells me one thing, that the average civilian really has no concept of officership, at least like we have, okay? This is how we conceptualize officership in the Commission Corps. And as you can see, it is teeming with meaning, okay? It includes professionalism and competence as an expert and an officer, knowledge and skills and expertise as a public health professional, practice of PHS core values, commitment to a common mission, and managerial and leadership skills. These are attributes that represent the ideal officer in the Commission Corps, the highest of the high, right? And it almost goes without saying that when we think and talk about officership, we are talking about qualities that are inherent to the officer, that are reflective of the officer's true self. In other words, officership must be authentic in order for it to be what we want it to be, right? It's not just what we do or how we act. It's not a costume that we can take on and take off. It's who we are. Tonight, I'll be talking about a potential impediment to authentic officership. And it's a subject that I don't think gets hardly enough attention. In fact, I've never seen it addressed in a formal a setting in all my years of service. And that impediment is a thing called status anxiety. I don't know who on the call has ever heard of status anxiety, but if you haven't heard of it, don't worry. It's actually a term that was coined by a French philosopher by the name of Alain de Botton. He published a book some time ago called Status Anxiety. And in this book, he describes status anxiety as largely a Western phenomenon associated with the modern age. And it's essentially people increasingly experiencing distress because they lack the financial or social standing that they're under pressure to have attained. Other ways of looking at it include persistent worry at being perceived as unsuccessful by others, fear of not measuring up to certain standards and ideals, and then facing negative repercussions, and uneasiness at occupying too modest a rung, okay? So here's the thing, status anxiety is a little hard to talk about, okay? There's something about it that makes us uncomfortable, right? I mean, so far I've been pretty matter of fact about it, but even so, I still feel a little cringy on the inside talking about this. Why exactly is that? Okay, so in my opinion, it's because of how we are socialized to view status. On one hand, from a very young age, we are all encouraged to aspire towards careers that are prestigious, have high status. So to be a doctor, a lawyer, astronaut, right? And these are professions that require a lot of education. So that's another marker of status. They also come with high incomes, another marker of status, okay? And then when we get out in the real world, what are we then also encouraged to do? Rise through the ranks, right? Move up the organization, climb the hierarchy so that we can sit at the top of it and have others look up to us, right? So we are encouraged on one hand to seek and desire and want status. But on the other hand, we are also in our highly individualistic culture encouraged to march to our own drumbeat, right? We're not supposed to care too much about what other people think about us. It's a bit unseemly to be status conscious, to be a status chaser, right? And keeping up with the Joneses has a negative connotation to it as well. So we are exposed to conflicting messages all throughout our life about status. And what that does is it creates cognitive dissonance when we're asked to confront status anxiety or similar subjects in ourselves, okay? But I do think that we have to push past this discomfort and talk about this anyway, okay? Status anxiety is highly relevant to the times that we're living in, and it's also relevant to life as an officer right now. Let me explain how status anxiety even came to be on my radar, okay? So a few years ago, I took a great deal of interest in understanding income inequality, okay? It was a hot topic in the news at the time. And it was discussed a lot in politics. And I really wanted to understand why it matters so much, okay? So I started doing a lot of reading and I learned some things about it. It is associated with a number of social problems. Some I knew already, like health disparities. We talk a lot about health disparities in public health. But I also gained insight into other problems that I didn't really know much about, such as certain patterns of crime associated with unequal societies. Also education gaps that are a little counterintuitive. And then also psychological manifestations like status anxiety, okay? So in the course of me reading about income inequality, I started reading the book Status Anxiety. And as I read that book, I started to recognize myself in the book, okay? Except in my case, it wasn't my socioeconomic status and it wasn't even anything to do with me as an officer. It had to do with my relationship status as a single woman, okay? So anyone who's made it to adulthood as a single person can relate to what I'm about to say. There's tremendous pressure, social pressure in our society to pair up with somebody, get married, have a family, live in the white picket fence house, you know, et cetera. That's part of the American narrative, right? That is social pressure. So if you're single as an adult and you actually want a relationship, at a certain point, you start to feel not only deprived of the tangible and intangible benefits of being in a relationship, but you also start feeling the weight of that social pressure on you, right? And it leads to self-consciousness, like you might imagine that woman in this illustration feeling that she's surrounded by happy couples and she's all alone, right? So self-consciousness, you might start feeling vulnerable to the judgments of others. You might start feeling like something might be wrong with you and other people are looking at you like you're inferior, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So in my situation, I spent most of my 20s and a good chunk of my 30s single. And for the most part, that worked well for me. Okay, allow me to focus on my career, get some accomplishments under my belt, move around a little bit without any hassles. And it was fine until I started approaching my mid 30s and I started to feel this pressure that I'm talking about. So what that caused me to be is very self-critical. I started to feel vulnerable to other people's opinions about me and negative. Like, so every doom and gloom article about how hard it is to find love in this world as a highly professional, accomplished woman, like I was reading those articles, right? And I was becoming even more self-critical and pessimistic, which is not like me, really. So it wasn't a good scene. So I was reading this book, and not only did I realized I had status anxiety, and I had a name for it, which was a relief. But I also realized that I needed to change my attitude about myself and my status if I was going to thrive in this world. And so it was something of an epiphany, right, that I had. Later on, I will share more about that epiphany. But I share all of that long story, just to say two things, okay? One, we need to talk about status anxiety. It's part of the human condition. We shouldn't be ashamed about it. No one is immune to it, okay? And then two, while in the grand scheme of things, relationship status anxiety is probably not a major experience or a major problem, I did learn a lot from that experience. And so I hope to be able to share with you some things that I learned about that in the event it helps at least one person on the call. And I also hope that by being open about my own brush with status anxiety, it will encourage you to contemplate this with an open mind, okay, in the next 40 minutes or so. So let's do that exploration, okay? Now I'm gonna talk about things you already know, okay? Right now we're under tremendous pressure in the core. We're about to enter another year of a global pandemic, COVID-19. It's taken so much from us and it's altered the way that we live. Then there's deployments. At the last town hall, Admiral Childs estimated almost 76,000 deployment days just this year. Colossal strain on officers and their families. And also the agencies to which those officers serve. The missions of those agencies continues to truck along, right? And as agencies are expected to do more and more with less, our officers are feeling the strain of those demands. PHS support activities. We are expected to continue to support the PHS through our volunteer work. And sometimes it does feel like a second job, right? And then I have awards in here because yes, that is a pressure. We are expected to get those awards. We're expected to be accomplished. I still remember coming into the Corps, and one of the first pieces of advice I got was try to get at least one award a year. And as a junior officer, that's like kind of like, you know, a little intimidating. Like that seems like a big feat. And in some positions, that is a big feat, right? But straight out the gate, I was hit with that cultural expectation, that cultural norm. And yes, it represents pressure. We are expected to get awards, wear our ribbons, and show the world that we are accomplished individuals. So we're opening ourselves up to judgment from others. That is a pressure. We need to acknowledge that, right? And then the mother of all pressures is promotions right now, right? Those who are up for promotion this year and beyond are going to basically feel like they're in a vice. That's how it is right now. Historic low promotion rates. So Alan de Botton in his book, Status Anxiety, he described what he sees as 5 distinct causes of status anxiety. And one in particular is relevant to promotions, and that's the concept of meritocracy, okay? So our promotion system is based on that concept. If you work hard, if you train hard, you are move up in your responsibilities, and you become an expert in your field, etc. You not only deserve to get promoted, but you will promote, right? That's the idea. But what happens if you go up for promotion multiple times and you just struggle to promote, right? What is the message that you internalize from that? It would take a very strong person not to eventually start feeling, some sense of shame from not reaching that goal, right? That is the ugly side of meritocracy. And so that's going to be a pressure, okay, that also needs to be acknowledged. So I just listed a bunch of pressures, okay, and taken individually, each one of these is a lot, okay? But we're talking about all of these occurring at the same time. It's a confluence of pressures, and so it's basically a storm. That's why I have this image here. We're in a storm of major stressors and pressures. And it's a major storm, like a hurricane, okay? So, but here's my optimistic take, and I hope you're ready for some optimism. Are you ready for it? Storms don't last forever. They don't. As with any weather event, storms eventually blow over. So that actually makes the challenge before us pretty straightforward. We just have to weather the storm that we're in right now. That's the objective. Holding on to our best selves as we weather the storm is imperative. How are we going to do that? We have to do it because that's how we're going to hold on to authentic officership. To me, these concepts mean the same thing. So what I invite you to do for the rest of my presentation is to keep the following questions in mind. How are we going to hold on to our best selves as we get through this storm? What threats to emotional well-being do we need to understand so that we can come up with the right solutions? And what might these solutions look like, okay, on an individual level? The social pressures that I outlined earlier represent risk factors for status anxiety, either because, like promotions, these pressures directly threaten an officer's ability to attain status, or because, like deployments, they are creating stress that is negatively impacting our emotional resiliency. Status anxiety is a problem that makes it hard to be our best selves. So now let's just try to better understand what this is so that then we can talk about how to combat it, okay? So you might be wondering if you have status anxiety at this point, okay? Here are some signs and symptoms. You frequently compare yourself to others, okay? You struggle with feeling good enough. And this is especially going to happen if you compare yourself to others and you consistently rate yourself lower than others, okay? You have fear of missing out, FOMO. So every webinar, every workshop, every training program, every networking event, you feel compelled to sign up for it because You don't want to be the one that misses out on something that could transform your status, that gives you that competitive edge if you have it on your CV, right? That's FOMO. And also you might have FOMO if it seems like all your peers are signing up for that thing and you don't want to be the one that's disadvantaged because you haven't signed up for it. Okay, it's a close cousin to compulsive busyness. All right, so I'm going to throw a stereotype at you. It's okay because it doesn't involve a protective class. But think about your stereotypical upper middle class kid, right? College bound, has his or her eyes on the Ivy Leagues. Okay. Now think about their extracurricular activities. It's probably an extensive list of extracurricular activities, right? Probably a list that is a mile long. They're going from sports to debate team to, volunteer work to everything, right? To make themselves competitive to that admissions board. And so you sometimes find yourself wondering, like, when does this kid have time to play or hang out with their friends, right? That's how busy they are. Their life is completely scheduled. So nowadays, what we're seeing is that lifestyle is spilling over into adulthood. Overachievers often associate successful people with busy people. So they keep themselves busy so that they can feel like they're on the path to success. But that is status anxiety, okay? That's a symptom of status anxiety. And then finally, personalizing negative feedback. Now, I don't know too many people that actually like negative feedback. Nobody really likes to be criticized, but maybe you guys know some people that do. I don't, okay? But there's a difference between simply not liking negative feedback and experiencing it like an insult to one's self-image. So people with status anxiety often veer towards the latter, okay, rather than the former. All right, so this is now going to be somewhat seemingly contradictory, right? Because I just said that status anxiety is an impediment to officership, but that's excessive status anxiety. There are such things as healthy levels of status anxiety, and it can be a force for good, okay? I want to make that clear. So even if you identified with almost all of those signs and symptoms of status anxiety that I just listed, it is possible that overall you've benefited from status anxiety. Okay, it's not all bad. So think of it like this, okay? Think of a slingshot. And when you have a slingshot and you pull back on that sling, right, you're creating healthy tension in the rubber bands, okay? And in the act of creating that tension, energy is stored in the rubber bands. So then when you release the sling, what happens is all that energy is transferred to the rock and it's propelled forward with force. That's your performance. It's enhanced by that tension, that healthy tension that was created by status anxiety. So when I came into the Corps, I was straight out of school. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that had this type of experience. I was exposed to the senior officers. I saw the 06s and the 07s, and they impressed me so much that I felt intimidated, okay? I remember going to category day and seeing retired Captain Charlotte Spires, who unfortunately passed this year. She was up giving a presentation talking about the National Veterinary Response Team. And I was just blown away. Like, she just seemed like she had so much confidence, her demeanor, her mastery of the subject matter, her deployment history. She had so many rich experiences to share. I just felt compelled to pay attention to every word she said. She's basically credibility on legs, right? That to me represents the senior officer. And I remember thinking, as I watched her, both feeling like impressed, but also a little anxious, like, how will I ever be like that, right? Like, am I good enough? I don't know if I have it, what it takes. That is anxiety. but it's good anxiety because that was the stuff that motivated me to work hard, train hard, do whatever I needed to do to reach that level, to reach that bar that she set, and maybe even surpass it. You know what I mean? So that's how it works. That's how status anxiety can be a force for good. It can motivate you. The problem is excessive status anxiety, okay? When it's excessive, it works against performance. It creates counterproductive stress. So when you think about that slingshot again, instead of pulling back in the sling and releasing it, you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling until the tension causes things to break. And that's not helping your performance at all. All right. So based on what I've just described about status anxiety and how it manifests, we as a group could deduce the kinds of negative impacts status anxiety could have on an officer's performance. It doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to see the implications on performance. For example, communication. Communication is integral to organizational effectiveness. We want our officers to be strong communicators. So ask yourself, how likely is it that an officer will be adept at communicating clearly, concisely, and fluently to diverse audiences when they're self-conscious and worried about being judged negatively, or when their concentration is split in multiple directions because compulsive busyness is eating up their bandwidth, right? And they're not able to be present in their roles, in their work. They can't read that email carefully, right? They can't listen as carefully as they should. Think about what communication issues might result from that, okay? And won't we see miscommunication occurring that contributes to inefficiencies and conflicts? How many interpersonal conflicts in the workplace are the result of some kind of breakdown in communication? It's pretty much all of them are, okay? Conflicts also occur when people stop viewing their colleagues as teammates and start viewing them more like rivals and competitors. So if someone has a bad case of status anxiety, it's probable they will perceive constructive feedback as a personal threat, and they will react accordingly. And so then you have a personnel issue on your hand. So that's just one example. If we wanted to, we could take up the entire hour coming up with other performance problems, but that's not the point, and I don't want this to be overly focused on problems. I will say this though, I bet that for every performance issue linked to status anxiety we could think of, we could draw a straight line from each of those problems to a PHS core value that has been impacted, okay? Leadership, service, integrity, and excellence. Embodying all of these values becomes very difficult when excessive status anxiety lives in us, okay? And as I shared up in the earlier part of my speech, practice of core values is fundamental to officership. We can't manifest officership without it. Authenticity matters too, okay? We want the world to associate us with our core values. That's why we have them on our website and in our doctrine. So how are we going to be able to walk the walk, right? If we cannot put into practice our core values, it calls into question our legitimacy and it undermines our credibility. So status anxiety is not just an officer well-being issue, even though obviously that's hugely important. It's also an issue that could affect our organizational effectiveness. And so that's why I really see this as an important topic. This is when we should be talking about what to do about it though, right? Solutions. Let's move to that type of discussion. And this is where it's going to get a little tricky. And here's why. It's very easy to assume that the answer to status anxiety is to stop wanting status. Stop wanting things you don't have. That is not the answer, okay? I really want to be clear about this. If your gut is telling you to go for gold, then by golly, you need to be going for gold, okay? You continue to push for that. The goals that we set for ourselves are very important. They're what provides us with a sense of direction and a target to aim for. And so I'm a big believer in not letting any person or thing dissuade us from our well-considered, heartfelt goals, even if those goals are ambitious, okay? There's a reason why I want to be crystal clear on this. It's because I've seen firsthand how easy it is to reach the wrong conclusion. So another story, okay? Remember, I talked about my own experience with status anxiety, relationship status anxiety, and how I had that moment of truth, moment of clarity when I realized I needed to change my outlook, my perspective, if I was going to thrive in this world. Okay, so I wanted to share this with my mother. So I went to her and I said, Ma, I can't continue to beat myself up because I'm single. I'm going to have to change my attitude. And I thought she was going to be happy to hear me say this, but instead her immediate reaction was negative. And why do you think that was? It's because she thought that I was giving up. She thought I was quitting my search for Mr. Right, right? She thought I was abandoning my dream of having a family and resigning myself to being single for the rest of my life. So then I had to tell her, no, Ma, I'm not quitting, right? I'm still going to put myself out there. I'm just saying I'm making a commitment here and now that I'm going to be okay, regardless of if I stay single or not, okay? I have the power in me to see to it that I'm going to be happy regardless. And after I explained that to her, she understood. So that's what I encourage you to do too, okay? Have this as one of your goals, one of your life goals, if you don't have it already. The goal of being okay regardless, okay? As simple as this goal is, it was tremendously helpful to me when I was dealing with my own bout with status anxiety, because what it did was it quelled the fear of the unknown that lived in me that didn't know it was possible to be okay regardless, okay? And that's really what's driving the anxiety. It's fear of the unknown. So the more you can do to internalize that belief that you have the power to see to it, you are going to be okay, you're going to be happy, regardless of status, the more that fear is subsided, and it creates room for courage. And that it's that courage that's going to help you continue to push towards your goals and not give up, okay? And courage also is important because it will help you see your full range of possibilities. You might have to change course, okay? You just might have to, or you might have to change tactics. So courage can help you see what options are in front of you and help you make the best selection without fear clouding your vision. Okay, so really think about this, embracing the goal of being okay regardless. And as with any goal, you need to have a plan for it. Otherwise, it's just a dream. So make a plan for it, have some strategies for it. Okay, yes, that is easier said than done. All I can share with you is a guiding principle that has helped me in my life, okay? And this is it. Make time for playtime. And I know this sounds really glib, but I'm gonna make a bold statement. Never before in the history of the Commissioned Corps has it been more important that we do this as officers, make time for playtime. And I'm not talking about going out and getting a gaming addiction. We don't need video games right now, okay? I'm talking about meaningful play that restores, recharges, replenishes us, and nurtures us from the inside, and feeds our intrinsic motivations, okay? So I'm gonna elaborate on that last bit. First, I'm gonna talk about extrinsic motivations. What is an extrinsic motivation? Any action taken to either acquire an external incentive or reward or avoid an external consequence is an action that's driven because of extrinsic motivation. So exercise is a good relatable example. For some of us, exercise is a chore. We don't look forward to doing it, but we do it because every year we have to take the APFT, and also we have to meet a BMI standard. So to avoid the negative consequences that comes with failing an APFT or a BMI standard, we maintain a level of fitness and we exercise. That is an extrinsic motivation. In contrast, an intrinsic motivation, actions that are done for intrinsic motivations are done because they're personally gratifying, they appeal to our interest, they make us feel good. We want to do those things, okay? So again, with exercise, some of us enjoy exercise. We look forward to doing it. Either we like the exertion and like getting our heart rate up, or we like the immediate outcomes of exercise, like stress relief, mental clarity, and energy, right? And so we would exercise even if we didn't have the APFT. We would do it anyway because we like to do it. That's an intrinsic motivation. Both kinds of motivations are valid. The world turns on both, okay? The key with emotional well-being in the long term is you have to have balance, because if too many of your activities, too much of your time is spent on extrinsic motivations, you leave yourself with certain deprivations, okay? What happens when you feed your intrinsic motivations? You're activating your internal reward system. And so you generate a lot of positive feelings, such as a sense of accomplishment, purpose, growth. So think in terms of skills and knowledge and wisdom, or muscle, right? Like if your exercise is your thing, stamina, control. So that's really important. If other aspects of your life don't feel like are within your control, having that autonomy is very therapeutic. I could keep going, okay? There's other things here. The key is that everybody's different, and different things spark these feelings in different people. Some people get it through their hobbies, working with their hands, volunteering, investing quality time with their family and friends. And other people are able to find it in their work, either directly through their task or mentoring or training new employees, public speaking. For me, I love data. If you give me a data set and tell me to analyze it, I would be happier than a clam. Seriously, that is one of my pleasures. The bottom line is it's incumbent on the individual to find what does it for them, because everybody is different. So as easy as it would be for me to say, oh yeah, if you're dealing with stress, anxiety, go out and exercise, get on a treadmill. Now everybody is going to get internal rewards from that. So I would never advise that just as a blanket statement. Why am I hammering this point? It's because it's not just that these activities make you feel good, even though that's also important. It's not just that, okay? These are the building blocks for internal validation, okay? And internal validation, that's where we derive our sense of security and self-worth. And it's the thing that protects the ego from all of the social pressures that life throws at us, okay? Internal validation is protective of the ego in a way that external validation is not. And here's the best way I can think of to illustrate it. Think of internal validation as like it's an umbrella that's folded up inside of you. It travels wherever you go, and it's accessible 24/7, okay? So whenever the storms of life come along, the pressures, right, you're okay, because you can whip out that umbrella and it will keep you dry. You might get a little damp, but you're not going to get soaked, okay? Your ego is going to stay protected. In contrast, with external validation, that umbrella comes from other people, right? And that's all well and good when those people are there. But if somehow they're not accessible and those storms come along, what are you going to do if you don't have an umbrella inside of you? You're pretty much going to be searching and searching for somebody to give you an umbrella. And while you're searching, you're getting wet, right? And your ego is taking on water. Eventually, it's going to get waterlogged. And that's when you get resiliency issues, because waterlogged things don't have that snapback that we need to withstand storms, right? That's what we don't want. So internal validation is very important. And it's essential to being okay, regardless. Remember that goal, okay? The more that we have to deal with, the more pressures in life, the more we need to be able to self-validate. And really think about that. If racism, sexism, homophobia, other patterns of bias and discrimination are in your reality, okay? Because you're going to really need to have a strong internal support system to get you through that. The great irony is that the more stress that we're under, typically what happens is we ignore the things that give us joy and peace, right? What we tend to do is double down on the things that are stressing us out, like our extrinsic motivations, right? And so we're not building up that internal support system that we need. And then that leaves us actually more vulnerable to stress. So it's a vicious cycle, right? Remember that the next time you're stressed out, you might have to fight your natural impulse to double down on work or whatever it is that's stressing you out. You might instead have to force yourself to play or get some sleep, okay? Because I'm a big believer in getting those 8 hours in, seriously, okay? So when I say playtime, all I'm saying is make sure that you are building time in your life to feed your intrinsic motivations. And ideally, you would get this in your job, in your role as an officer. Most, if not all of us, were intrinsically motivated to put on the uniform, right? To join the Corps, because public health is the thing that makes us happy. Serving the public is the thing that fulfills us, right? So ideally, we would couple our intrinsic motivations with the work that we do every day and our PHS support activities. That is how we get that force multiplier effect that we talk a lot about in the Corps. It's how we become unstoppable. However, burnout is a thing, and I get that. We do. We know where it comes from. It comes from giving and giving and giving of ourselves until we're depleted. So when you're burnt out, it's hard to find that passion you used to have. And so all that means is that you're going to have to get your play time in outside of work. Okay, you're going to have to find that joy outside of it, and that's okay. All right, that still counts. And what do I mean by that? I mean that that's still going to allow you to bring your best self into your work as an officer. And the more you can bring your best self into your role as an officer, that is officership right there. Okay, that's that connection there to officership. So remember that, okay? You might be wondering, okay, I got so much going on in my life. How am I supposed to make time for playtime? What does that even look like? And it's not a bad question. It starts by looking critically at what's on your plate and being open to change. So the plate that I have illustrated here, at first blush, it looks like the picture of health and wholesomeness, right? It's fruits and vegetables, all colors and textures, and it looks great, right? But it's only after you look at it really critically that you see that there's some nutritionally important components that are missing from it. It's not balanced. And if it's reflective of someone's diet, I'm going to be worried about that person's health and ability to withstand stress, because there's no protein on there. And you have to have protein in order to have muscle, right? And strength. So you're going to have to do the same type of assessment in your own life, okay? And you're going to have to ask, how much am I carrying around is it only there because of anxiety? This is an anxiety-driven activity. And that is where the rat race feeling that we sometimes have, that's where that comes from, is it's anxiety, right? You're doing things because of some kind of external motivator, and it's not feeding you internally. So those are candidates for removal and replacing with play. Okay, but again, you have to be willing to make that decision. Think less about impressing others and conforming to a social norm or expectation, and think more about your core needs and interest. Okay, what is going to fulfill you? What do you really want to do with your time? Okay, and this is really important when it comes to assignments. When we look for new assignments, we're often looking at titles and billets, right? And I'm not saying that those things don't matter, but do they matter more than whether or not that job is going to feel like a chore every day? Do those things matter more than whether or not you're going to be able to bring your A game into that position, because it's giving you those internal rewards that you need in order to feel intrinsically motivated? I don't think that those, billet and title matters more than those things. Okay, so give yourself permission to look holistically at your assignments before deciding on a particular move. It's okay to do that. Okay, I'm going to recap because I threw a lot out there. Okay, so 1, embrace the goal of being okay regardless. Albert Einstein was quoted as saying, if you want a happy life, tie it to a goal. And what I'm saying is make it a goal. Okay, it's the same idea though. Make it a goal and make a plan for it. 2, make time for playtime. Don't ignore your intrinsic motivations. And remember, you may have to work to have work-life balance. It may not, work-life balance doesn't always just spontaneously emerge. You have to sometimes work for it. And it starts by setting time aside for the things that you really want to do, and then setting and enforcing boundaries around that time and guarding it protectively. Don't treat it as an optional thing. Okay. And then 3, I didn't talk about this, but it would be incomplete of me not to. I've been coming at this from a philosophical angle, but philosophy has its limitations. If you're struggling with distress, depression, anxiety, and self-help strategies aren't working, please do not forget that therapists and counselors exist. They're trained to help. Okay, don't do it alone. So now I'm going to wrap up with some closing thoughts. Okay, we're about to enter a new year, 2022, and with that, this gives us the perfect excuse to try out some new things and set some new goals so that we can make our best selves even better. The Surgeon General has identified officer well-being as one of his chief priorities, and we all have a role to play in that. So this is the call for action, your call for action, okay? If everyone in the call would just make a commitment that this year we're going to try to uplift our mental and emotional well-being, so that by the end of 2022, we're all in a healthier state of mind, better than we are right now, and maybe even better than we were in 2020. I'm confident we can do that, okay? Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know how long the storm is going to last that we're in right now. But I am confident that when we get on the other side of this storm, we're going to be stronger than we were going into it. And I'm also confident that 20 or 30 years from now, when we look back on the times that we're living in now, we're not going to immediately think about the stress and the frustrations that we're living in right now. What we're going to remember is how we came together and helped our country in this time of great need. We're also going to remember the connections we made in deployments. We're going to remember the people that we helped and how they were grateful to us for our assistance. We're going to remember the sacrifices we made, but we're also going to remember all the wonderful accomplishments that we made. And I'm confident that the future generations are going to be enthralled with our stories and be inspired to follow in our footsteps. I see all of that, okay? And I hope you do too. So I'm going to end with this quote from Venus Williams. I don't focus on what I'm up against. I focus on my goals and I ignore the rest. Everyone, this is the mindset we're going to have to bring to this war, the silent war against disease. Now is the time that many of us will need to renew our commitment to the mission of our service. We will need to remember and reclaim the passion that drove us to put on the uniform. That passion is what will enable us to go the distance, to fight the fight that we're going to have to fight to win this war. The country needs us right now, and we have to remember that this is our calling. Public health is not what we do. It is who we truly are. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Oh, Rear Admiral Hale, that was wonderful. You never disappoint, and I could feel your heart in your conversation to us, and I hope that we take it to heart and move forward as a community to do better, to not stress ourselves out so much. We don't have any questions in the chat, but I would like to ask you if you had something that those of us who stress and have that anxiety that you talked about, a couple of things that we could do tonight and tomorrow, just to help us to get it through immediately, you know, if we don't need to seek additional help. Could you speak on that?
No, it's a great question. I mean, I think for me personally, and again, like everybody has their own little quick fixes when they're feeling wound up. And I'm almost embarrassed to admit mine because it's kind of silly, but I'm a big fan of that movie Purple Rain with Prince. So, you know, when I'm starting to feel blue, I will always put that in. And I'm always like, I get back to normal right away. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to kind of find the things that, you know, help you with self-care. You know, that's a term that we are using a lot. And I do think that there is value in kind of knowing yourself, knowing what types of things soothe you and put you in a better state of mind. The other thing is reading. For me, I love to read. So it's not even about self-help books. It's about any like nonfiction, anything that helps me feel like I'm learning. It is a great escape. And so when times of stress, I think we do need to look at some healthy forms of escape. And so learning new things, new skills, it's a great way to do that. And you could always look at it in terms of helping you to have the types of conversations we're having right now. Like when I was reading about income inequality, it was a way for me to kind of escape a little bit, you know, the status anxiety I was experiencing. But now I'm able to use those insights to help others. And that's really what it's all about, is helping other people. I'm glad that Seneca Toms agrees that Prince is awesome, because since he's been gone, it's like the world has not been the same, I tell you.
I agree. Any questions, guys? I don't see anything in the chat. We only have about 4 minutes. If you do have questions, though, for Rear Admiral Hale, please feel free to email me, and COA will make sure that we get those questions to her. Thank you, Rear Admiral Hale. If you don't have any other comments. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you. I just want to take the time to personally thank Rear Admiral Hale and Commander Wilson Egby for leading us to Rear Admiral Hale. So many of us struggle with status anxiety. And for me, it was a concept that I've never even heard of. And there's a number of people during this talk who texted me and said, I think she's talking to me directly. and we just, on behalf of COA, we just want to thank you for your talk. It was so meaningful and so relevant and inspiring.